Now it is my privilege to invite Mr. Shovan Dasgupta, Technical Instructor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Sister Nivedita University, to felicitate our esteemed session chair, Dr. Reshmi Noshkar. We extend our sincere gratitude to our chair for kindly agreeing to moderate this session. Before we begin the session, I would like to briefly outline a few presentation guidelines. Each presenter will be allotted 8 minutes for their presentation with an additional 30 seconds of grace time. A warning bell will be rung at the 6-minute mark to indicate that 2 minutes remain. At the end of the allotted time, the bell will ring twice, signaling that the presentation time has concluded. I kindly request all presenters to adhere to the time limit to ensure the smooth and efficient conduct of the session. Thank you, and we look forward to your presentations. Without further delay, I now invite our session chair, Dr. Reshmi Noshkar, to take over the proceedings and begin the session. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I can come to you.
Good afternoon, all the participants. Am I audible? Yeah. Good afternoon, my dear participants. It's a true honor and privilege to have been a part of the ICA conference today. And this particular session, which has to speak about digital infrastructure, platform publics, and communication inequalities in contemporary society. I've been shared all the papers, I've been going through the titles. I don't have the entire paper with me. I'm looking forward to listening to each one of you. But the titles itself, I was just going through them. I must congratulate each one of you. I mean, there have been so much of innovative, thought process when planning out a research paper. I mean, it is truly appreciable, new concepts like that of women and, digital heart. I mean, I found this topic to be very interesting and looking forward to having chaired this session. So without further ado, can we start? Can we call upon the first paper presenter? We will go as per the serial. Okay. So the first one, which speaks about entanglement of water, media, chemical industries and bodies, affective geographies of culprit residents. I am having Professor Suhaib Mohammad Hanif from Pondicherry University. Sir, it's all over to you. So I found your topic to be very interesting, and it speaks about environmental concerns. It speaks about addressing, water pollution as well as urban development. Looking forward, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. I'd like to pack as much as I can in 8 minutes, time slot. So my paper is titled Entanglements of Water, Media, Chemical Industries and Bodies, Affective Geographies of Kalapet Residents. Kalapet is a village in, Pondicherry. It's, 15 kilometers away from Pondicherry, but it's part of that. And it was to sort of trace it to, colonial times. It was acquired from Nawab Daud Khan by the French East India Company in 1703. And it was known for rich foresty place. There were a lot of trees. And then French administrators extracted Kalapet's, rich and unlimited timber and wood to fuel their architectural grandeur, because they were constructing a lot of interesting architectural, buildings. Even now people, tourists throng to this place and take pictures and a lot of images. So what has happened is, these architectures are not remaining only as architecture, but they have also become sort of symbolic images and digitally mediated and remediated, and lot of creating a lot of memory spaces, etc. But Kalapet has always been a site of sort of a geopolitical, geological vulnerability, in the sense, during the colonial times as well, armies used to march along this particular seashore, and so it remained a sort of vulnerable, site. But even now we are seeing a different kind of vulnerability in terms of, water, and because of the presence of two chemical industries, the quality of water in this particular place has, become bad. And so the kind of vulnerability that I'm talking about can be felt in its material and immaterial erasure. So when I'm talking about the architecture, French architecture such as, St. Louis Fort, it does not account for the nature of Kalapet, right? So because the timber and wood are taken from there, and these buildings have come up now. And when I'm talking about the timber and wood, it is also referring to water as well, because wood, forestry, all of that is easily entwined with water as well. So in this paper, then what I'm trying to do is how can we then understand water? How can we sort of re-ontologize water? Because there's a lot of literature that is happening now, wherein works on elemental media, water as medium, or even elements as media, because recently there's a book titled Saturation Elemental Media. I don't remember the authors, who talk about how sky can be a medium, or water can be medium, or fire can be a medium, etc. So, and media ecology scholars have also started talking about how media is largely an environment. And so instead of just looking at it from a technological perspective, so that is what I'm trying to do in this paper. And I can also connect this idea with what Harold Innis talked about in terms of what is known as staple products, right? So he says that such staple products of local resources were extracted to build an empire. Harold Innis in his The Bias of Communication, saying to build an empire carrying a global insignia, right? Some kind of a marker. Like here the French architecture is that one. Again, drawing on Innis, it was not merely the transportation of wood and timber, because it is also transportation of ideas and information, because all these architecture have also become now images, and they are doing rounds. So in this context, how am I going to locate water? So I think the entire understanding of water and Kalapet region also, as a space, demands attention to new ways of engaging with history and events that surround it. So water is not merely something like H2O. So there is there's an interesting book written by Ivan Illich, which is titled H2O. So he is talking about how water has gone through a lot of narratives. So we are not trying to understand water as H2, which is a sort of a scientific data. That's just one account of it. But understanding and meaning of water is also partial and situated. So what is water in the context of this particular region is different from what is water in somewhere else. So it is people's engagement with water that comes to define what is water. And this is sort of like I'm drawing on the works of on the philosophies of what is known as new materialism. So there are a lot of people who have been writing about it. So in this context, so more than trying to understand water as something scientific, I think we need to understand how water is perceived and how water is bodily experienced by everyone. And so I'm trying to understand how residents in this particular area are experiencing what is water. Now it is actually then the focus is shifting towards, because water is something non-human, so it doesn't mean that non-humans are supposed to be discounted, discarded, etc. So they also have some vibrancy about them. And there are a lot of works on this, like vibrant matter, which like Janet Bennett says. And when we are talking about how people experience water, I think there are a lot of emotions, the way they sensorially engage with water, which becomes important, and that sort of like explains us how water is locally grounded. So the meanings are locally produced than any established standard convention of what is water. So that is what I'm trying to understand, and saying that we should not miss out on the playful, sensuous pleasurable encounters with water, as well as the mundane everyday aspects of our interactions with water. So we conducted a few interviews with people in this particular locality. We also went to the archive in Pondicherry, and the archive is located closer to the rock beach. So we tried to source papers because we wanted to understand tsunami and how tsunami was reported. And so we went back to 2004 and we collected a few images, etc. So a few excerpts from the interviews that I conducted. So initially, like, we found that people were reluctant to purchase land in this particular locality. They even delayed their decision for years because people say that their perception of water, about water, is that there is a certain kind of a smell. The groundwater is spewing chemical odor and chemical smell because of the presence of these industries. But that said, people are not people do not give up on buying lands because they always thought that they could come up with some pre-mediated measures to sort of purify water and so on and so forth. Yeah. So first, I think it reminds me of the first use of a sand filter technology that was used in India to purify water, and that happened in 1865 to treat Hooghly River water. And a similar such measure was undertaken in the year 1885 at Pittsburgh. So now I'm looking at this as from an infrastructure perspective. So most of the residents in this locality, though they said that water is not good, they are willing to sort of invest in water purifiers. So not a big deal, right? And everybody is investing in water purifiers. But people wanted to invest in water purifiers not only for drinking water, but even for general purpose, water usage. So here, water purifier also acquires its meanings from locally grounded interactions. For example, there was a test result that one person took. It's not that everybody wants to take do a water test and then share it with people. So one person took it and then it was shared with another person, and then people started sharing it. So WhatsApp media was used to share this information so that people will take decision of this. And when one of the respondents after receiving the results, without even understanding the contents of what water is, then tries to search in Google and then identified a source who could provide water purifiers of different kind, which can deal with this impurities contained in this water. So here we see that, and there are few people like Wendy Chun, who argues that the internet is leaky. She calls the internet as a leaky infrastructure. So here the WhatsApp is becoming leaky because it has to transmit water from one end to the other end, etc. So that is one. So what I'm trying to say is that if you're even looking at how somebody is searching for Google, the motivation to search in Google actually comes from the fact that the test results show something, and the test results are also nothing but a text, right? You can also see it viewed as a text. It is nothing but water manifested in a different form, right? So the materiality of water is expressed in the form of test. So there is a motivation for that. And again, when you're searching in Google, Google uses a lot of water to run its search and run its data centers. And again, you have undersea cables, without which the transmission of data doesn't happen. So there's water then which is entangled with even with technologies. So that is one aspect that we were looking at it. The second is we spoke to a particular person whose name is Kaniyamma, and she spoke about her experience during tsunami. And when tsunami hit, it was like 4 months after she got married, and she was living in this particular locality by the seaside. So she was when alarm was raised, she wanted to take the digital TV that was presented to her by her brother, for the wedding. But by the time she could move out, she found that the water already gushed into her house, and she was submerged in water. She gulped down some water as well. Then she reached out to the roof, and then she managed to rescue herself from this. And then after that, what happens, she moves to what is known as tsunami quarters. So she's dealing with water in different ways, and she moves to tsunami quarters, which is on the other side of the road, which is opposite side of the beach. And she lives there for 15 years, but then she now has moved back to the seaside. Now, what was once considered to be in another temporal dimension appears to be something that she would like to relocate to because she is negotiating with other stuff. For instance, what is that? Her husband is an alcoholic. And he drinks every day, and then he comes home. But the place where she's staying, again, the tsunami quarters where she's staying, there is another chemical industry which is close by. So every day she has to negotiate with the stench of alcohol. she has to negotiate with the chemical, that water that is laced with chemicals. And, she also, earlier had, negotiated with, tsunami, right? So she decided to move because, her daughters also were feeling embarrassed about the fact that, the father comes and is creating a lot of chaos. And so she decides, to move back to the, sea. So this is another way in which we can, try to understand how they are negotiating, with water. And in all of this, we can also see there is an affective engagement. So it is an emotional engagement. So she is engaging with all these, forms sensorially, right? Just, what is water as a kind of a standardized meaning. There is an affective engagement with, all these, places as well as with, water. So this is how people are negotiating. And she comes back and she stays here and she says that this is a much better place. I don't mind if my husband is drinking because, she is, the sea is very close to her house, but the bar is also very close to her house. And she says that it is easy to locate her husband even if he is drunk, rather than having husband stay in, tsunami quarters, because the bar is too far from there. And she had to he had to travel a lot of distance, and it is always unlit roads at night, and he might fall somewhere. So in the place of this, she negotiates with the place as well as water of different kinds, including alcohol. And it also discloses how the feminist subjectivity emerges. So feminist subjectivity, we cannot understand it from the perspective that there are some essential characteristics, and that's how we go about understanding women. No, it all depends on how in different contexts women negotiate joy and happiness that the breeze, water, everything could give. So we also visited archives as well. So I'm just so she even makes a very interesting statement. Something like Odunadan Tanni and Ilana Patni, something like it's in Tamil, which means you have to run like water in your life, otherwise you will die of starvation. So that again explains, so she brings in the metaphor of water. So we need to understand, water and how it entangles with life, right? And different, contexts and, etc. So Farhana Sultana from Bangladesh, but she has been writing extensively on water. She teaches from, she's at some university in US. She's been writing on water, etc. She says, this kind of struggles that people face, especially women face, right? We need to pay attention to such multifaceted manifestations of struggle. She had a struggle when she had to rescue herself from tsunami. She had a struggle when she was in tsunami quarters negotiating with her husband, and then she has come back. So all these multifaceted struggles, we must pay attention to this over water, and how people suffer for water, suffer with water. But then suffering is not something that takes away the agency, because people know how to convert vulnerability into some kind of an opportunity. So that's also we were locating. So this is the archive that we visited, and there were a lot of news stories that were published, and we did see some inequalities in presentation. So the first image here is image of someone who is in a wheelchair standing in front of the sea after tsunami, and then again on the right hand side you have the youth. They are also standing in front of tsunami, and this is the caption, braving nature's fury. But then again, if you look at the disabled person, he looks at the devastation. So there is an inequality in terms of experiences as well. There are a lot of other stuff, but for want of time I'm skipping. So there are there is a lot of banner stuff that people they celebrate the anniversary of tsunami every day, every year. And we have done a detailed analysis of how, for instance, Auroville, I don't know how many of you have heard about Auroville, sort of is training people, especially fisher women, on how to negotiate with this grief. So they have come up with a doll. Now, doll is again a non-living thing, a more than human stuff, but it is being used to negotiate with life as well. Yeah. Thank you. Anyways, sorry.
To convert my audio mixer, how the audio is only coming.
Hey everyone, welcome back. In this quick tutorial, I'm going to show you a super
And these are the research questions. How is community hotspot in Tumkuru, and what role does it play in everyday life? How is access shaped by space, infrastructure, gender, caste, digital divide, and materiality? Does community hotspot reduce digital inequality, or does it reproduce the older social hierarchies? How do users experience Wi-Fi in terms of access, dependency, and everyday use? This is my literature review. Here I'm using literature of different scholars. And the main one is Understanding the Spatiality by Henry Lefebvre, Production of Space, and Brain Larkins, Jan van Dijk. Yeah. So methodology, I have done qualitative interviews of different, taken interviews of from different people of different age. Also did 2 focus group discussions. Like this is a design that helped in understanding the lived experiences, social meanings, and unequal forms of access and use. So, in the key findings, the analysis is about space. The first one I would like to talk about is space. Earlier people in this area, in this particular area, earlier the internet was not there. Like the cell phone tower came last year in this particular place. So the PM Vani also doesn't reach to this place. There's one Gram Panchayat hotspot for a cluster of 10 villages, which only has a radius of 1 kilometer. So obviously all the 10 villages cannot be depending on this. So they have their own community mesh network. So in terms of space, how this works is, earlier people almost had no connectivity. Later the hotspot created an access, but access still had to be mediated by distance, passwords, trust, time, and social relationships. By distance, I mean, like people had to, there were only few spots where this Wi-Fi network was there. So people had to walk 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers in order to come and access this particular Wi-Fi network. And so initially, like it was not like unlimited internet was given to the people. There was only limited internet, so they had passwords, and these passwords were circulated among the people who actually needed it. So, but that passwords were given to other people by these people, to only the people whom they think were eligible, or they're only their friends or their relatives. They decided the eligibility. So yeah, the hotspot also changed how people, occupied the public spaces. Like mostly the men where after a certain point of time in a day, only the men came out to use the internet hotspot, and they occupied all the prime public spaces. Women were hesitant to come outside because there was no name calling. All of this used to happen. So in that way, there is a gap that has been established. And in terms of infrastructure, people describe Wi-Fi as faster and more useful than mobile data, especially for Wi-Fi, YouTube, WhatsApp, bill payments, and work-related tasks. But they also mention power cuts, signal fluctuations, tower issues, repair delays, and limited range. So yeah, in this sense, the hotspot is not stable background system. It is a lived infrastructure that must be repeatedly repaired, adjusted, and justified. And the next code is gender. The woman's access to this particular network is limited in in comparison with men, because they had to look after their home and their work, and then they will get the chance to have their own time with the internet. And yeah, so gender inequality here is not just an exclusion, it is differential freedom of movement, time, legitimacy. By legitimacy, I mean like even if they are using it, they get to hear things like, oh, you're using internet, you're using phone, you have not done this work. So they have to justify why they are using their phone. They do not have their own personal space to use it that way without being able to justify it. So at the same time, many women also describe internet use as empowering. They have learned to design different designs, recipes, and communication skills, English words, YouTube, content, payment practices through Wi-Fi. So women are often imagined as less visible users or were only later brought into the network's use and maintenance. So since it is a community network, Wi-Fi network, like it needs continuous repairs and maintenances, but women were not taken into consideration for maintenance of it because they thought like they might not be able to do it. But only when they learned that yes, they are the ones who have taken it more responsibly and doing it, then only they became more visible in terms of digital equality. Yeah. The next one is caste. It is not very visible in this particular interviews that I have done. Like it is more complex in the narratives. Some interview deny caste differences in hotspot use, and they say things like everybody has used it, now there's no difference, it used to be there in the previous times. But it is seen where, like, in terms of who has, like how many people in the family have their own devices. For what exactly are they using this internet for? Are they able to use any government schemes? Like when I interviewed them, people coming from the marginalized communities, they use it more for entertainment purpose or to leisure their time. They use it, but not actually, as an tool for knowledge or education, or to apply for government schemes, or to apply for even Aadhaar card. They are not doing it for that. So it is very much layered and complex in nature here to understand caste. And also, like, these people walk for 2-3 kilometers to use this, but the people who come from different caste, upper castes, have their own ISPs. So we have to look at it from that way also. So who has the ownership, who has the power, and who has the economic support? The next point I would like to discuss is the digital divide. It is not just simply having the access to internet, but also the differences in the smartphone ownership, whether you have a keypad phone or a smartphone, in the literacy, confidence, ability to search independently, all of that. So like digital divide works in different ways here. Okay, I'll just move forward. So the study I'll just conclude. The study examined the everyday experiences of community hotspot Wi-Fi in Tumkuru. In order to understand how public internet access is shaped by space, infrastructure, gender, caste, digital divide, and materiality, the findings show that while the hotspot has expanded connectivity and created important new possibilities for communication, learning, in everyday use, but it remains highly uneven. It mediated by distance, mobility, repair, device ownership, digital skill, and social hierarchy. As a result, community hotspot cannot be understood as a simple technological solution to digital exclusion. It brings the internet closer, but not equally. It creates access, but that access is conditional. It enables participation, but often within the limits of pre-existing inequalities. So at the same time, the study does not suggest that community hotspot Wi-Fi is ineffective. It is experienced by many users as necessary and valuable, especially in contexts where mobile data is expensive and unreliable. It enables communication, exposure to new knowledge, digital learning, and degree of inclusion where that previously was unavailable. However, its benefits are uneven, and this unevenness is central to understanding how digital infrastructures work in lived settings. Thank you.
Uh, Participants, it's a request since there's a time which has been fixed for the presentation. If we can just abide by it. I mean, I understand 6 minutes is very less, but still, if we can just concentrate on what have been your research objectives and what have been your major findings, I think that's going to help, the session to be over within the stipulated time. Okay, on this note, I invite Poulomi Nundi, research scholar from Amity University. She has, she'll take us through the understanding of platformed faith and unequal visibility, uses and gratification study of religious content engagement among urban youth in India. Poulomi, all over to you.
Do I start the slideshow? Select from the beginning. Yeah. Okay, and please keep the mic closed. Okay, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Poulomi Nundi from Amity University, Kolkata. And today I'll be presenting my paper titled Platform Faith and Unequal Visibility, Uses and Gratification Study of Religious Content Engagement Among Urban Youth in India. So, to start with, this study explores how young people today interact with faith-based content on digital platforms, particularly social media, and what kind of emotional and cultural and communicative needs these kind of interactions fulfill. So the central question guiding this research is, what happens when faith becomes part of platform culture? To begin with digital religion is simply is not simply religion moving online. What we are witnessing is a transformation in the way religious experience itself is mediated. Platforms such as Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook shape visibility through algorithms. And they privilege content that is emotionally engaging, visually appealing in short form videos and reels, and which are highly shareable. As a result, faith becomes embedded within everyday digital habits. However, this visibility is unequal. Certain forms of religion become amplified because they are aesthetically attractive or emotionally resonant, while quieter or less performating forms may remain invisible. This creates what I refer to in this presentation as a communication inequality, where platform logic influences which expressions of faith receive attention and engagement. This study approaches platforms as active cultural environments shaping how religion is consumed and interpreted by urban youth. So, yeah. This slide situates the study within broader platform culture. Today's youth experience religion in fragmented and hybrid ways. For example, a user may share devotional music not because of deep ritual practice, but it creates calmness, familiarity, or emotional comfort. Like we often come across videos of spiritual gurus with emotional music that also deals with contemporary issues, especially targeting the youth regarding their personal or professional life or whatever hardships they face. So that kind of content has a tendency to get higher engagement in terms of against content that is strictly very doctrine in terms of religiosity. So religious reels and short videos are often consumed alongside entertainment content. This blurs the boundary between devotion, lifestyle, and digital performance. Platform culture also encourages participatory behavior. Youth are no longer just audiences. They become curators, commenters, meme creators, and even micro-influencers of faith content. So coming to my research gap and objectives, Existing scholarship on digital religion has extensively discussed online rituals, cyber communities, and religious identity. However, there is relatively limited work focusing specifically on urban Indian youth and their everyday engagement with the religious content through the framework of uses and gratification. Most studies tend to examine religion from institution or ideological perspectives, whereas this research focuses more on audience motivation and emotional practices. Therefore, my study has three objectives: to identify the motivation behind youth engagement with faith-based digital content. Second is to understand how platform structures influence the visibility and circulation of religious communication. And third, to explore the emotional and communicative gratifications users derive from this sort of engagement. These objectives helped frame religion not simply as belief, but as mediated social experiences through platform culture. Moving to my next slide, the theoretical framework. This study combines uses and gratification with perspectives of digital religion. Uses and gratification theory is especially useful because it shifts attention from what media does to people towards what people do with media. At the same time, platform studies help explain how algorithms and engagement metrics shape what users repeatedly encounter. So the framework is interdisciplinary. It connects media psychology, digital culture, and religious communication to explain how faith operates within platform environments. Coming to my research design and methodology, the study adopted a mixed method approach. The quantitative component involved survey responses collected from urban youth users of social media, mostly targeting students, university students from 18 to 30 years. The survey explored patterns of platform usage, motivation for engagement, emotional responses, and perceptions regarding religious content online. Alongside this, qualitative insights were gathered to better understand personal experiences and interpretative meanings behind engagement patterns. The study was mainly focused on platforms such as Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, because these were found to be the most frequently used space for interacting and engaging with faith-related content. The combination is quantitative and qualitative analysis. Coming to my key findings. One of the most important observations was that emotional reassurance emerged as a dominant motivation behind engagement. Participants frequently consumed religious content during periods of stress, uncertainty, loneliness, or emotional exhaustion. Another major finding was the importance of visual and aesthetic presentation. Content that was visually attractive, emotionally expressive, musically engaging, or motivational received significantly higher interaction compared to text-heavy or doctrinal content. This suggests that platform logic strongly influences religious visibility. This study also found that engagement was often less about formal religious commitment, more about emotional connection and cultural familiarity. So additionally, algorithmic repetition played a major role. Once users interacted with certain types of faith-based content, platforms continuously recommended similar material, reinforcing engagement cycles. Coming to qualitative insights, several participants described religious content as a source of calmness. Some users mentioned that short devotional videos or spiritual quotes help them manage anxiety or emotional stress. Others explained that sharing faith-based content created a sense of cultural identity. Interestingly, many participants did not view their engagement as strictly religious. Instead, they associated it with positivity, motivation, and emotional healing. This reflects how digital faith practices are increasingly hybrid in nature, situated somewhere between spirituality, culture, emotional, and lifestyle performance. Another important insight was users were highly aware of platform influence. Some participants acknowledged that algorithms repeatedly pushed similar kind of religious content onto their feeds, gradually shaping their consumption habits. So this brings me to the conceptual contribution of this study, where I introduced the concept of platformed faith visibility.
The concept suggests that religious communication online is shaped not only by belief system but also by platform structures such as algorithms, aesthetics, virality, and engagement matrix. In other words, visibility itself becomes an important part of contemporary religious experience. And to conclude, digital platforms actively shape how religion is experienced, performed, and emotionally consumed. Urban youth among urban youth, faith engagement online is deeply connected to emotional reassurance, identity negotiation, cultural belonging. Study highlights that platform algorithms influence which forms of religious expression becomes amplified. Therefore, understanding religion today requires understanding platforms as cultural and communicative infrastructure. Finally, this research contributes to broader conversations in media studies, digital culture, and religious communication by showing how faith increasingly operates within everyday networked life. Thank you so much.
May I now request Ipshita Roy, Research Scholar of Sister Nivedita University, to come and present her paper on the double-edged digital heart, socio-technical barriers, and digital marginalization among women entrepreneurs in Gangetic West Bengal.
Good afternoon. At first, I would like to explain the word heart. The heart is a traditional rural marketplace, and the term digital heart refers to online marketplace and digital business platforms. Double-edged means technology provides opportunities, but also creates new challenges. India's internet connectivity is expanding rapidly. But simply providing internet access doesn't automatically empower women, especially the women entrepreneurs. The study argues that women face actually triple burdens. Number one, digital skill gap. Number two, physical borders and structural shadows. Women may know how to use the apps, but they lack the advanced digital business skills like online marketing, digital payment management, customer engagement, e-commerce options. Social restrictions actually limits them to their mobility. They may not be able to travel freely for purchasing materials, for delivering products, networking with the customers as well as to the suppliers. Household responsibilities and patriarchal norms control a woman. When women go online, how long they can use the device, whether they can own a smartphone of their own or not. For my study, I have actually chosen 7 riparian districts: Murshidabad and Malda, Nodia and Hooghly, Howrah, North and South 24 Parganas. Mostly these kind of industries are there: handloom and textile industry, handicraft and cottage industries, food processing and homemade food products, agriculture and allied activities, sericulture and silk production, small retail online businesses, jute-based products. To define the problem of the research, I have found that digital inclusion is often understood only as infrastructure expansion. Women's participation is constrained by domestic inequalities. Patriarchal power structures regulate internet usage. Technology alone cannot guarantee women empowerment. My research objectives are to analyze digital communication and women entrepreneurship, to examine barriers to meaningful digital inclusion, to understand gendered household power relations, to explore digital platforms as economic spaces. I have found mostly 3 important research questions. Those are: how do digital communication infrastructures shape the entrepreneurial experiences of rural women in Gangetic West Bengal? What structural and gender-based barriers hinder meaningful digital inclusion among rural women entrepreneurs? To what extent do digital platforms empower rural women economically while simultaneously reproducing existing patriarchal inequalities? Mostly my hypotheses are digital access alone doesn't ensure women's empowerment without social reform. Patriarchal Domestic Structure Act, I repeat, Patriarchal Domestic Structure Act as significant inhibitors to entrepreneurial growth. Shared device dependency reduces women's digital autonomy and privacy. Time poverty driven by unpaid care work severely affects business scaling. For doing the entire project work, I have actually depended on various books and journals. I have asserted some of them, like Development as Freedom by Amartya Sen, The Paradox of Women's Work by Padmini Swaminathan, and so on. I have asserted in my full paper as well. I would like to mention here the theoretical framework that was actually elaborated by Amartya Sen and his capability approach. The capability approach is defined by its choice of focus up to the moral significance of individuals' capability of achieving the kind of lives they have the reason to value. The theory relies on the distinction between resources like owning a smartphone that a woman easily have and capabilities. Having the digital literacy is not the same. Secondly, I have also took the help of feminist political economic theory, which perspectives highlight that influence of unpaid care work, household structures, and patriarchal norms on women's economic participation. Even with digital skills and access to social media, women must navigate domestic responsibilities, as we all know, societal expectation, and structural limitations. It is actually the interpretation of the theoretical framework, and here I have added one thing, that technology is not a neutral force. It often reproduces existing social hierarchies. Digital visibility is still regulated by male household members through surveillance and device control. For doing the research work, I have adopted qualitative research design. Along with survey, qualitative data were collected through in-depth interview with selected participants to explore their lived experiences, challenges, motivations, and perception regarding the use of digital technologies in their business. For the content analysis, I have found mostly three dynamics, that is platform dynamics, informal branding, and invisible labor. Platform dynamic like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram is being used for online marketing as a product display platform and customer communication channel. Women build trust through local language communication. This creates age-to-age communication like human-to-human business model. Women often manage their online business while simultaneously doing household works. For that, business activity became irregular, time constraint. Here is the key findings that major barriers to digital inclusion, that is the time poverty, shared devices, mobility restriction, digital literacy, patriarchal control. And after the COVID, after 2020, I have found that the percentage of rural women entrepreneurs of using digital technology is increasing rapidly. Here is two case studies I have found, only mentioned from my different kind of interview and case studies. 36-year-old homemaker from Murshidabad began selling homemade pickles through WhatsApp group during pandemic. Husband owned the only family smartphones. This is the barrier. Online availability was restricted by childcare and cooking. What is the outcome? Despite high product demand, the business could not scale due to lack of autonomous access. Same thing actually applied also to my second case study, that is handloom shari seller of a Nodia. She also faced same kind of problem. Here is a brief of the case study I have given. Insight from the case studies that digital literacy translates into tangible business outcomes. Peer learning and mentorship amplify impact. Structural barriers persist. Empowerment is actually multidimensional. Meaningful empowerment requires shifting hardware-focused policies through structural reforms. Policies must prioritize independent smartphone ownership for women. Literacy program must be gender sensitive and address the internal power structures of the home. Support system for unpaid care work are necessary to alleviate time poverty. To come to our conclusion that digital hearts expand market reach but introduce deep systematic vulnerabilities. Women face overlapping social biases, poor connectivity, and digital literacy gaps. Rapid digitalization without equity worsens rural digital marginalization. Cyber fraud and online harassment threaten business continuity and well-being. True inclusion requires combining technical access with targeted gender-sensitive training. Thank you.
Thank you, Ipshita. We move forward, and I take this opportunity to invite Anunna Mitra from Fortis Hospital, Anandapur at Kolkata. And I invite her to do the presentation on digital communication inequalities and divides in healthcare scenario. Ma'am, all over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anunna Mitra. I am the administration head of Fortis Hospital, Anandapur, and my paper title is Digital Communication Inequalities and Divide in a Healthcare Scenario. As we all know, modern day healthcare, we have various platforms and various modules of and apps for accessing the healthcare facilities. But while using those apps and while using those devices, we find these are real life scenarios what we face in the hospitals. We find really very communication gap and user accessibility and user usage facilities for the end users. So digital inequalities, the background remains that we have effective communication is a critical component of quality healthcare delivery and patient safety. However, inequalities in access to digital information, what we term as digital health, and the quality patient care, these are all limitations to use more and more digital devices. So we have the communication resources, those often create barrier while giving digital digital information, prescriptions, report deliveries like this. So the factors with low digital health awareness, literacy, really prevent patients from understanding complex treatment plans. There's a language barrier. Rapid digital transitions often overlook non-English speaking population. So most of the apps, most of the modules that we find in the market readily available are mainly English based. We don't have much local or regional language based apps for the people to use. Then socio-economic divides are there. Differences in income and access to hardware, mainly the smartphones, those create a tiered system of care where many of the people, tired why? Because some of the economic strata of the society, they have full access to the digital health, whereas there are few who are left disconnected. So the patient's rights are also being violated, in the sense that these digital gaps, this information provided over the digital information supports, they affect the patient's ability to comprehend what is being given to them, what medical advice is being shared by the doctors, what are the test reports are coming for their blood tests and all. And so this creates a digital awareness, safety and communication gap. So the research problem mainly lies in the digital advances and the patients who are not being able to access the digital health support fully because of, one, information inaccessibility. Despite advances in healthcare systems and digital health technologies, many patients still face difficulties in receiving and downloading or understanding health-related information. Communication barriers may lead to misunderstanding of medical instructions, preparations for certain investigations, special instructions, medication errors, delay in treatment, and reduce patient participation in decision making. Modern healthcare and modern medicine always encourage patient engagement along with when the doctors are making their treatment plan or when they are making the how to proceed for the next step of patient management. So information and participation in a shared way by the patient as well as the patient's family members are an integral part of modern medicine. So when there is a digital gap, this interactive participation also drops. And then these all remains an institutional challenge, and almost every healthcare organizations, they face this challenge in educating the people where there is an inequality or where there is a gap. So the objective of this study is to examine how digital communication inequalities affect patient care in the hospital settings, to identify strategy that healthcare organizations can adapt to minimize this divide and improve patient-centric communication. So there are various multi-layered nature of the digital divide. There are mostly, when we went for the questionnaire session and when we were doing the research-based project, so we found mainly there are three distinct levels where digital divides are very much seen. So the first level is the access. So access remains the physical availability of the digital tools, internet connectivity, broadband, speed of the internet, and also the hardware. These are hindrance in the rural areas mostly, but in urban population, in urban habitants, this is a boon. In the second level, it comes to the skills. Skills mainly in the literacy part, where they cannot navigate hospital booking systems, automated booking, appointments, seeking appointments, billing portals, self-registrations, downloading of prescriptions and investigation reports. And of course, the third level comes for the outcome, the treatment outcome. So how successful the use of digital tools that indicates how better the health outcomes are and what is the patient satisfaction level. The higher the patient satisfaction level while using these apps, that proves that the digital missions are successful. So the objective of this study is to examine how digital communication inequalities affect patient care. So we have found there are gaps, demographic gaps, where mainly the senior citizens having hindrance in using the access to the apps and the portals. Then there is the language proficiency. Non-English speaking people are unable to access the gaps, and the process friction always lies in appointments, online bookings, online billing, all these things. And the clinical mediators, the patient and the healthcare provider interaction quality also depends on the accessibility of these digital modules. And of course, the core outcome remains patient safety, treatment adherence, faith on the hospital, the institutional trust building, and patient satisfaction. So we have done a questionnaire session. We have selected randomly 65 people who have worked as the outpatient in the department, where we categorize our target audience as senior citizens, rural residents, non-English speakers, and first-time visitors. And then what are the analysis part? So we found that the key findings are 72% of the patients, they still prioritize verbal instructions and verbal communication over digital medium. Then mostly the senior citizens, 48% of our targeted audience, the senior citizens, they are unable to access the reports, billings, downloading of prescriptions, access to their digital reports, archiving, retrieval of the archives, all these things. And of course, the primary barrier remains with the language, and then there's a digital gap which correlate the medication error and delayed care. So our aim is to transition from the digital fast to digital equitable care. For that, we have, to close the gaps, we have initiated in the hospital human touch, more and more direct interaction, empathy with the people, to educate them with the digital literacy awareness, and integrated strategy where strengthening communication requires hybrid approach. Digital, yes, of course, digital support would be there, but with that hand-holding and 1:1 communication directly, and this will systematically reform the entire healthcare system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ananda ma'am. We call forward Kajal Shaw, research scholar of Central University of Punjab, and she's here to present. Her topic of her presentation would be In Touch, Out of Sync, exploring relationship between mobile phone use and academic performance among Santal indigenous girls in rural India. So all over to you, Kajal.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I am Kajal Shaw. I'm a research scholar at the Department of Mass Communication and Media Studies, Central University of Punjab. And currently, I have completed my data collection. And this study is a part of my doctoral study. Not exactly belongs to the core objective, but when I was collecting data, actually, let me introduce myself about my PhD research. It is about mobile media communications, mobile media interactions among tribal girls, a study on Santal community of West Bengal. I basically belong to this place, and I am exploring the mobile media usage by Santal girls of West Bengal. So here I go. Basically, the title of my paper is In Touch, Out of Sync, exploring the link between the mobile phone use and academic performance scale among Santal tribal girls in West Bengal. This is the overview of my PPT. As you can see, the introduction, research gap, objectives and hypothesis, methodology, findings and discussion and conclusion. So I'll be really quick to just to say that the smartphone, first of all, why I'm studying academic performance among tribal girls. This is because that tribals are the marginalized. Okay, we know the concept of intersectionality, that how gender, caste, race, religion, given by the Crenshaw, idea of Crenshaw, leads to more marginalization. So we know women belong to the marginalized community, but the tribal itself is a marginalized, excluded community, and women of this community who got mobile phone in COVID, either by the help of government or by some means, screens to, who they were in schools, in higher schools, government helped them to buy mobile phone, we can see in COVID-19. And then they started using it for academic purposes and personal uses also. So in my pilot study, I found that they are more using it for academic works. So thereby I get the idea that how mobile phone is affecting their studies. I came across to this scale, academic performance scale. So basically the research problem is, does increased mobile phone help or hinder their academic journey? So the significance of the study, as I already told you, and of course, the concept of gender digital divide, as we heard in the auditorium also, the topic is so ingrained and so explored, and the dimensions are kind of branching out. Not only digital divide, but the digital stratification that I came across today as a concept, and I really liked it. And therefore, I have an objective to examine the correlation between mobile phone usage, basically the time spent on mobile phone, and academic performance among 115 marginalized Santal tribal girls enrolled in undergraduate programs in West Bengal, India. So in this state, there is university, the University of Bardhaman. Under that university, there are 10 colleges which provide Santal as an honors course and as a pass course also, you can say it. So since it was a part of my doctoral study, I kind of tried to understand the relationship between the mobile phone use, the time spent, and the academic performance. So I formed null hypothesis that there is no significant relationship between academic performance and time spent on mobile phone. And alternative hypothesis is there is a significant relationship between students, basically the girl students' academic performance and time spent on mobile phone. The study design is it was done basis on the convenience sampling, and offline questionnaire was formed and distributed to the students. And age group, like the girls who participated belong to the age group of 17 to 21 years, and of course they belong to the undergraduate category, undergraduate students actually. And instrument used for this was the APA scale developed by, as you can see, the authors here, the Burmicher, Grayton, and McGregory. And it was an 8-item Likert scale, which has internal consistency of 0.89. And we also asked them to report their mobile phone usage in hour. So first of all, in order to see the correlation, we have to run the test of normality. We run two kind of tests, as you can see, the Kolmogorov and the Shapiro test, and we found that the mobile phone usage, it is not normally distributed, but the APA score, academic performance score, which was a self-reported, it was not an examination score, it was a self-reported score, it was normally distributed. Therefore, and the analysis was done on IBM SPSS version 21. Then we run the simple, and first of all we run the Spearman rank correlation, non-parametric correlation between the mobile phone use duration and APA score was observed, and to see if there is a correlation between both the variables. And second, we run a test, simple linear regression, to see, to assess whether time spent on mobile phone meaningfully predicts the academic performance scores or not. And here is the result. The scale itself gives a stratification of data that based on the mean, we found out that 55.65% of students, which is 64 students, are ranking like moderate scores, okay, and which ranks like, of course, it is from scale 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to agree. Okay, so thereby we found that moderate, good, poor, and excellent scoring, and you can see the percentage there. And finding Spearsman correlation says that negligible correlation. As the row value you can see, the correlation is essentially 0, indicating no meaningful linear relationship between time spent on mobile phone and academic performance score, and statistically non-significant. So we cannot reject the null hypothesis, and the result could easily have occurred by chance as well. Therefore, and second test, we run the linear regression analysis, in which we found that mobile usage time does not meaningfully predict the academic performance, and the model explains virtually none of the variance. You can see the numerics here. And therefore, to the sum up, the discussion is null hypothesis is supported. No statistically significant association between mobile phone usage duration and academic performance, aligning with the Abbasi et al., which was a finding, which is another paper based on the same scale, who found mobile phone can enhance or not just impair academic achievement. And dual role of smartphone. Phone serves as both educational tools and recreational devices. The balance may offset negative screen time effect, particularly for students with limited other digital resources. Moderate to good performance, as we can see that 94% of the students show moderate to good academic performance regardless of mobile phone usage time, indicating sustained academic engagement with this community and context-dependent nature. Result contrast with the studies on urban and mainstream youth, cultural context, limited prior digital exposure, and powerful use may explain different outcomes for tribal girls. So conclusion, I already said, and this is a very marginalized study, a study done on marginalized community, and hope I look forward to do such more studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Kajal. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I take this opportunity to now request Dr. Shrutto Prasad, an independent researcher and a media educator, to go ahead with his presentation on the coded public sphere, generative AI, and the reproduction of communication inequalities in Global South.
Very good afternoon. I'm Professor Dr. Satya Prasad. I'm an independent media communicator and researcher. This paper is jointly written by me and my colleague Dr. Archan Mitra, assistant professor in Amity School of Communication, Amity University, Mumbai. So basically, this study is about the coded public sphere, generative AI, and the reproduction of communication inequalities in Global South. So I would like to just first explain what is coded public sphere. The coded public sphere is basically that digital space where you can say activists and everyday citizens, they communicate sensitive information, often sensitive information, through coded language or memes, basically to avoid the state censorship. So that is coded public sphere. And as you know, the background and context of this study, the public communication is increasingly organized by platform code, datafication, recommendation systems, automated moderation, and generative AI outputs. So let's first come to AI as a mediator. Generative AI is no longer something that only supports communication. It increasingly structures what becomes visible and credible. Global South vulnerability. As you know, the Global South is marked by language, class, cultural representation, and digital access inequalities. These things shape who is recognized by the AI systems. Shift in inequality, the divide moves from access alone to algorithmic visibility, machine legibility, and epistemic recognition. So coming to the problem statement, AI-driven platforms promise wider participation, but reproduce structural hierarchies through training data, ranking systems, moderation rules, and dominant language bias. Now, vernacular publics, localized knowledge, cultural specific meanings, and low resource language communities remain systemically underrepresented or distorted sometimes. So the research problem is therefore not only unequal digital access, but unequal communicative power inside algorithmically mediated public spheres. So the central problem here is the coded public sphere converts existing social inequalities into algorithmic hierarchies of public visibility. Coming to the research objectives, first, of course, conceptual, defining the coded public sphere as an AI-mediated communication or communicative information formation. Then diagnose, identify how generative AI and platform systems reproduce language, culture, class, and access inequalities. Then map the shift from the traditional digital divide to a layered algorithmic divide. And of course, the purpose being to develop a framework integrating algorithmic accountability, data justice, and inclusive communicative design. The complete study basically moves from the concept formation to explanatory modeling and governance-oriented recommendations. Coming to the research questions, the question 1 is about how do generative AI and algorithmic media systems reshape communicative power in the global south? Then through which mechanism do AI-driven platforms reproduce hierarchies of public visibility, language, culture, class, and access? What framework can support equitable AI-mediated communication through accountability, data justice, and inclusive design? So to give the answers in brief, AI acts as an infrastructural gatekeeper of visibility, credibility, and agenda formation. Inequality is reproduced through dominant language data, recommender hierarchies, moderation misrecognition, and uneven platforms legibility. Here the legibility is the key word. Equitable communication requires accountable systems, multilingual data sets, participatory governance rooted in global south context. Since this study is primarily in the backdrop of global inequalities in the global south. So if you come to the literature insight and theoretical framework, so we have the public sphere and counterpublics. The public debate is structured by unequal access, voice recognition, and institutional mediation. The platforms organize a participation through ranking recommendation, moderation, and data extraction. Then of course comes the algorithmic operation. This is a new term. Automated systems can reproduce racialized, gendered, linguistic, and cultural hierarchies, which is the case these days. And data justice, fair communication requires representation, participation, accountability, and equitable treatment through data systems. Now, how do we frame the framework goes something like this. Structural inequality leading to datafication, leading to algorithmic mediation, and visibility hierarchy. Methodology, we have chosen the research design, analytical strategy, coding procedure, validation logic. And as you can see, we have here the open coding, the axial clustering, mechanism mapping, framework synthesis. Methodological position, this study does not claim proprietary algorithmic access. It develops a completed conceptual diagnosis and framework. Coming to the findings, finding 1, AI functions as a public sphere infrastructure, shaping visibility, credibility, and participation. Then finding 2 is about epistemic bias, privileges dominant languages, Western knowledge systems, and data-rich populations. Finding 3, the algorithmic hierarchy amplifies some voices while attenuating or distorting vernacular and marginalized narratives. These marginalized narratives is something that is a common occurrence in global south. Then the final finding, the digital divide is increasingly transformed into an algorithmic divide of access, representation, legibility, and visibility. So to come to the final discussion and conclusion, the findings show that communication inequality is not only a matter of internet access or platform participation, it is increasingly coded into the technical, linguistic, and economic infrastructures that decide visibility and public relevance. And in the conclusion, the coded public sphere requires an expanded theory of communicative justice that includes algorithmic accountability, data justice, multilingual AI design, and participatory governance for global South publics. So if you finally look at the digital divide to algorithmic divide, the path somehow goes like this. First, the access, then the datafication, then the model bias, then the ranking logic, and then comes the public voice. So the original contribution, a completed conceptual framework for explaining how generative AI reproduces communication inequalities and how much more inclusive media ecosystem can be designed. So as a final word, I would just like to mention that basically the public and the coded public sphere has to be examined, particularly in the background of global South, because we all know how many inequalities, be it digital or racial or linguistic, exist in global South. So that is the primary aim of this study. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shutta Prasad and Dr. Arjun Mitra in absentia. It was a wonderful presentation on AI and generative AI content. We move down to the last paper presentation today, and may I invite Amrutha KJ. Yes, a research scholar of Pondicherry University, and she would be taking us through addressing inequalities and platform-induced precarity, everyday encounters of journalists in hyperlocal news websites. So all over to you, Amrutha. I'm sorry with the name. Amrutha, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, I am Amrita. I am a research scholar in Department of Electronic Media and Mass Communication, Pondicherry University. Moving straight to the title, it is Addressing Inequalities and Platform-Induced Precarity, Everyday Encounters of Journalists in Digital Native News Websites. We have seen the digital platforms coming to all the fields, and when it comes to journalism, it reshaped journalism a lot. Digital platforms and technologies, it gave multiple avenues for journalists. Many journalists, they have many former journalists who were working with traditional media organizations, they have now came up with their own news websites, YouTube channels, and even like social media handles and so on. So this has also actually transformed the labor of journalism. The value, the platform metrics and the news metrics have somewhere embedded, and this actually has transformed the labor of journalism a lot. And these practices of these new practices of journalists, they have been conducted in the name of attending social values, and which largely serves as tactics against the conflicts of entanglement of values of journalists and digital platforms. And going to the review of literature, the previous scholarship have addressed values as something affective, and they have addressed the psychological dimensions of value, and it actually means that when personal and institutional values conflict, journalists they do not simply comply to whatever platform says, or they never resist, but there is a process of negotiation happening. That means selectively reformulating the institutional values to align with their deeper commitments or their own personal values. And this can be viewed in the framework of negotiative theory, how values are prioritized and reconfigured in practice functioning ultimately as a coping mechanism against the psychological and structural demands of journalistic work. So when we speak about values and journalism, as I told previously, we cannot omit technology. So technology is already, technology is already embedded with values, or it is value laden. So we have scholarship in that area too. Values are materially embodied through constraints and affordances that design features place on user behavior. So this framework actually give a material dimension to the values. While talking about these material dimensions, these values are not just categorized as something worthwhile. It is being seen as materials to work with in the larger assemblage of platforms, journalism, people, idea, content creation, and all. So we have already spoken that digital platforms have transformed the labor of journalism. This is actually inducing a sort of precarity among journalists, in which these working journalists, they are caught up between the value, between the logic of digital platforms, where algorithmic metrics plays an important role. So they are actually caught in a precarity, or when we speak about that precarity in terms of values, it is something, a conflict between their own journalistic value they uphold and the value of the platform. Actually, scholars have came up with a concept called platform paradox, in which platforms are not actually giving whatever they have promised to. Yeah. So, when we talk about precarity too, precarity is not fixed, rather it is relational, and it leads to transformation. And this dealing with platforms is not a passive adaptation. It is actually an active coexistence with the platforms, and this can be viewed in the lens of the strategies they uphold. That again can be problematized as tactics that they deal in the conflict of platforms and their own values. So going to the methodology, to address these research questions, we have interviewed 11 journalists from digital native news websites working in Pondicherry, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Karnataka. And snowballing sampling method was adopted, and data were coded using Atlas TI software. And going to the research questions, what are the major conflicts that arise between journalistic values and the commercial logic of digital platforms? How do journalists negotiate the precarity arising from the conflicts between journalistic values and the commercial logic of the platforms? Yeah, so as we have discussed, journalism is a practice underpinned by a strong value system. The respondent journalist of the study confirms journalism practiced as a moral commitment even under this pressure of platforms. But however, these journalists say that doing news stories that consistently prioritize fairness and public interest comes at significant cost of these deleted videos, legal notices, platform bans, and their reduced reach. So these are the courts. So they have, I think you can read through the courts. So they have, they have told us few words. For example, if they are using Palestine, or if they are using the word Dalit, that particular story is not getting much reach, and they find it really frustrating, and they have expressed their dissent over this is actually an autonomy against their choice of words, or in general editorial autonomy. So one journalist told us if she wanted to if something she has to report on a rape that has happened, she is forced to use the term sexual assault. So she told rape is not a sexual assault. We cannot just term it as sexual assault and leave it as such. So a rape is a rape, a murder is a murder. So this few journalists view against something against as their journalistic autonomy. And not just the choice of words, many of their social media pages were taken down without warning, their contents were flagged without providing a context, and accounts were suspended. So one of the journalists told us that like when they reported against a religious organization in Karnataka, following a court order, their YouTube channel was blocked. And another person, he was a co-founder of he's a co-founder of a digital native news website in Tamil Nadu. He expressed that like, okay, their Facebook page was banned, but it is actually again a tedious process in which they have to communicate with an system there. It's not a human sending them the message. It took much time for them to communicate, to be in touch with someone in Facebook so that they can retrieve their Facebook page. So they find it equally frustrating, not just taking away their Facebook page, but that communication process is also very difficult for them. So this is actually I mean, putting them in a precarity where low engagement is treated as a failure, and and they view public value of their content too. So this is conditional autonomy that is delivered to the journalist, not a full autonomy while dealing with the platform. Moving on to the next one, negotiation of values. So there is no, I mean, as we told, precarity is relational. There is no a complete subversion due to precarity. What happens is negotiating between the everyday insecurities of platform power and their passion to uphold something very democratic. So these tactics are also socio-technical. I mean, it's not an individual choice, or it's not I mean, purely an affordance of technology. It's a mix of both. And the study has identified obfuscation and personal content moderation as the two main tactics that they have undertaken. So to gain visibility, to get the desired visibility for some stories that actually needed some public attention, what they do is they make they will create some they will put some tags that is related to something very trending. So to put that tag, they are not doing it as such. What they do is, if that is some interview, they will ask some questions that is related to that trending tag, and then they will include that particular interview in their content. I mean, they will include that question in their particular content, and then they are putting a tag, I mean, title and a, what is it called, like picture related to that particular trending tag. And other person, he told that like they do, I mean, instead of doing all these political stories, they do much more of sports and entertainment story. And what they do is like they will embed the link of their political stories or some human interest stories in this entertainment story. So that will not come under the scrutiny of algorithm, and that's how like they are not considered here about the reach, but at least they feel that it should reach some people. So when it comes to personal content moderation, again, they are not ready to compromise with the content, but they do some some tactics in headlines, and then they will manage to get that reach. Then so yeah, coming to the discussion in conclusion, here values are not abstract ideals, but they are lived in daily negotiation with the platform, and this can be conceptualized as soft resistance, which is actually, I mean, they are trying to resist, which is not a complete or absolute resistance, it is a partial resistance. Coming like within the system, they are trying to resist against the logic of the platform. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you to all our paper presenters for their very insightful and thought-provoking presentations. Now we have come to the end of the paper presentations for this session, and I would like to open the floor to the audience so that you can ask questions, share your observations and comments for the paper presenters. Would anyone like to ask questions or share any insightful thoughts? Okay, all right then. I would like to open the floor to our esteemed session chair and ask her to share her remarks.
Absolutely, I agree with her. Absolute enriching session and a very thought-provoking session. As I said, before I moved into the room, I just had a glimpse of the title. But now going through the entire understanding of the paper, I think each paper is very unique, and each paper of it does so much of justification to this technical theme that we have selected, particularly to speak about digital inequalities and communication inequalities in the contemporary society. I mean, all the papers, whether you speak about the first paper which speaks about entanglements of water, media, chemical industries and bodies, affective geographies of Kalapreet residents, presented by Sir. I mean, it speaks about, the entire journey of how people are using, how these three aspects, whether you speak about water, how you speak about chemical industries, how they are interrelated with the well-being of people. And Sir very correctly used certain case studies to speak about, the challenges that people face, the residents of, Kalapreet, who speak about, how they moved away during the time of tsunami, and how they are again relocating back themselves. Speaking about how, and he correctly used that how WhatsApp and all forms of digital platforms are being utilized to communicate. I mean, it was such a wonderful understanding of how, digital communication and digital inequalities at the same time can actually, be used or has this very integral understanding of our everyday life. Indeed, Sir's study was more of a qualitative study, taking up certain case studies particularly. I mean, I was just wondering if we could do a study at a greater level, where we could have done and studied the things more at a qualitative, to speak about how greater number of people were being affected by these elements of well-being. I mean, it could have been a more substantiate paper. So, but it was a wonderful presentation, and the way Sir explained, I mean, it was truly, truly and very insightful session. Thank you, Sir. Thank you for the presentation. I moved down to the next paper, which spoke about experiences of Wi-Fi infrastructure, everyday encounters, disconnectivity among people in Tumkuru, Karnataka, which was present by Kanaka. Kanaka, it was a wonderful presentation which actually brought about, this biggest irony, where we speak about digital, connections and digital communications, digital platforms, trying to build in communication facilities. But on the reality, when we go down to ground zero, we see that there is much amount of digital, what you speak about, your paper spoke about much about digital divide and challenges of it. So I think that was again something which speaks about, this wonderful understanding of how, digital, you use the word digital inclusion and digital exclusion. I think there's much amount of, good, study which you have actually very correctly selected for today's presentation. So I must congratulate you for that. I moved down to the third paper which was presented by Poulumi Nondi, and it titled Platformed Faith and Unequal Visibility, a Uses and Gratification Study of Religious Content Engagement Among Urban Youth in India. Poulumi, I thank you for this wonderful presentation, and you've done a thorough study where you actually spoke about how religious discourses are happening using digital platforms like YouTube. You spoke about Instagram and all that, and so it was a wonderful paper which speaks about how this religious discourses and religious, understanding, and the way the algorithms, you spoke about the algorithmic effects, how same content gets, feeded constantly by people who are watching it. So it was a wonderful presentation, and again my heartfelt congratulations for this wonderful presentation. I was just wondering, you just spoke about, you did a survey, your study was a mixed method approach, and you used both qualitative and a quantitative study. Your study was basically, your sample was the students of the university. But when you spoke about a title like Urban Youth in India, I feel, and when particularly religion comes into being one of the very important keywords for your paper, I personally believe if you would have probably you will do this in future. If you could have just gone about trying to explore how educated students, your sample, and how if you could do a comparative study with how, YouTube or, digital platforms are so easily available to uneducated sectors of urban youth also. So if you could do a comparative study, that would make your paper more enriching, more interesting. There are people who get sweated with messages, and this usually happens with that layer of people who unfortunately do not come with formal education and so on. So a very interesting study that could have been actually, it could have been an additional work to your paper, but it was wonderful. You took all the method to apply a mixed method study, and I think you do an absolute justification to the understanding of your paper. I moved down to the fourth paper, and the fourth paper basically talks about the double-edged digital heart, socio-technical barrier and digital market marginalization among women entrepreneurs in Gangetic, West Bengal, presented by Ipshita. Yes, Ipshita, digital heart, it's an evolving concept, and my congratulations, my heartfelt gratitude to have brought up this concept. You, however, brought in certain case studies, and yours was again a very qualitative approach. I think a better aspect, if you have most time to give, a quantitative study of it, talking about what are the opportunities as well as what are the drawbacks, particularly in the era of today where we are speaking about women entrepreneurs and women empowerment. I think this would be a, another angle that you could take out, not only focusing on certain important case studies and doing a focus group. I think you mentioned 2 focus group that you did. So a more elaborative study, speaking about things in general, about what are the problems that women entrepreneurs face when it comes down to digital heart, the fact that they are not given mobile phones, the fact that they cannot use mobile phones beyond certain hours, that you rightly pointed out. I think it would have done a more, justified way of representation. A mixed method is always the best mechanism to actually establish. I moved down to the 5th paper, and the 5th paper was on digital communication inequalities and divides in healthcare scenario, as presented by Anunna Mitra from Fortis Hospital. Ma'am is associated with the Fortis Hospital. She's the administrative head, as she introduced herself. So nothing much, ma'am, but what I personally believe that, you spoke about the problem, that what type of problems you encounter when you are talking and dealing with patients, how they find it difficult to follow, and they prefer more personal talking and more personal, sort of interpersonal communication rather than, this digital intervention. What I personally believe, ma'am, if we can think about an alternative, how can we popularize the fact that, you mentioned in your slides a concept of where senior citizens do not feel comfortable. So how can we make it, this digital, digital divide, the digital gap that comes in with whether it is the senior-aged people or whether it is dealing with people who come up from the rural areas, what can be an alternative mechanism? And I think one of the alternative mechanism to involve more amount of participation would be a fact of popularizing it. So if you could concentrate and if you could work on in future, as to, coming up, roving in mechanisms as to how we can popularize, digital communication in healthcare, and how we can, how we can make it more simplified and easy for all these senior age people or people coming from rural sectors. I mean, that would be a more interesting study. Take for example, there are all these apps, I'm sure, like all these concepts which are a part of the e-governance sector, e-hospitals and all. People have to travel long distances from rural area just to see whether they, or just to find out if there is a bed available in a hospital. So how do we popularize these concepts? I mean, these can be a very interesting factor, a lot of awareness issues that can also be worked out. So I think these were some of the missing links, but otherwise it was very interesting. A paper of yours, and my heartfelt gratitude again to you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. I moved down to the 6th paper, and this 6th paper was titled In Touch, Out of Sync, Exploring Relationship Between Mobile Phone Usage and Academic Performance Among Santal Indigenous Groups in Rural India. It was presented by Kajol. And yeah, Kajal, congratulations for this wonderful presentation. Particularly, my heartfelt congratulations to you and gratitude to you particularly, because you did this work on the Santal communities, absolute marginalized segment that you took up for studies. I must share my deep, gratitude for taking up such an explorative study. Also, I must congratulate you. Your paper was absolutely, quantitative a study and very statistically placed. What I felt was, maybe if you could use some alternative mechanisms to speak about, a more qualitative approach, giving case studies as to how you can imbibe more young students and particularly students of Santal community, how you can make digital education more a possibility. I mean, it would have been a more elaborative study. Oh. Okay. But I must congratulate you. On your first attempt itself, you've been thoroughly successful. So that was the 6th paper, and I moved down to the next paper. That's the 7th paper that was presented for this session. The 7th paper was titled The Coded Public Sphere, Generative AI and Reproduction of Communication Inequalities in Global South. We have Dr. Shotto Prasad do the presentation, and Dr. Archun Mitro, in absentia, do the presentation. My heartfelt congratulations to you, sir. I mean, you've taken up this evolving trend of digital technology, which speaks about generative AI. And you are so correct, sir, when you speak about generative AI, one of the major drawbacks, which I assume is going to be a challenge, is to speak in terms of AI hallucinations. AI hallucinates, AI has all these drawbacks of, biasness which it sets in, and your paper actually justifies that. So thank you for the wonderful paper presentation. It was wonderful listening to you, sir. I was just wondering some more case studies, since your specific work was on global, South, and if you could have brought in some more case studies, that would have enriched, the understanding and understanding of the concept more clearly with us. And I moved down, speaking about the last paper for the session today. The paper was titled as Addressing Inequalities and Platform-Induced Precarity, Everyday Encounters of Journalists in Hyperlocal News Websites. It was presented by Amruta. And Amruta, congratulations for the wonderful presentation. Truly, journalists and hyperlocal news websites, the way you pointed out the presentation, you spoke about algorithmic biases, you spoke about what is the problem that journalists have to encounter in using specific words. Like you use the word sexual assault has to be used instead of the word rape. I mean, all these, thanks to bringing it up, your study has to justify all these challenges, everyday challenges that journalists, particularly in hyperlocal news websites, have to face. So algorithmic biases, algorithmic surveillance is one of the major challenges that we are facing, and I mean, your paper truly justifies this. So congratulations for doing that. I was just wondering, since you spoke about all these words which get filtered out, say whether as you said, certain words, get identified and it has to be replaced, otherwise it will not go down to its, audiences. There's some amount of filtering. I was just wondering if you could use a more qualitative technique to study this. Like, you've done 2 focus group. I mean, you've done certain interviews, in-depth interviews. I was just wondering if you could use some coding mechanism, it would make your work more interesting. Using NVivo software, if you could utilize and, you could use these codes, and it would justify your presentation more. So that was all, but as a session chair, I find myself extremely honorable. I must confess this, that it was a wonderful session, being a part of this session. I mean, it was an enriching session. I came to learn so much of new things, and I really sincerely thank SNU, I sincerely thank ICA for giving us this opportunity, for giving us a platform like this where we could all come in and we could, get ourselves actively engaged into understanding all these various nuances of digital inequality. So my humble gratitude and my humble thanks to ICA and the SNU and Sister Nivedita University, who happens to be the Eastern Regional Hub for ICA. It was wonderful, enriching session, and I think we should look forward to having more such, concrete sessions like this, which actually brings, or that actually provides all people, all researchers, all participants, giving us a platform where we can actually get into meaningful conversations like this. So I thank this, and on this note, I'll sum up. I thank all the participants for being here today. Particularly, sir, I see many people who've traveled long distances to be a part of this session. My humble gratitude to them that you've taken out time and you've been traveling long distances. On this note, I thank each of the participants, and I thank the organizers for having this sessions. Also, my gratitude to all the student coordinators who've been helping me out throughout. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity that I've been provided today. Thank you.
Please, I request all the participants to stay here. We will request all of you for a group picture. Ma'am, please. Sir, please. And I request all the participants to come up.
As someone who has just traveled all the way from Hyderabad, my voice has also gone out a little bit because I just landed in the afternoon. I would just like to thank the volunteers. They have been doing a commendable job. A big shout out to all the volunteers for their active participation and helping us out with the location and the other things and the routes and everything. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.